guys, Joe here with Glass City Candle Company. I've decided to put together a little Q&A type video for you guys, see if maybe I can help you guys out a little bit, or maybe get you guys to know me a little bit better. So I made a post in the DIY candle group asking for some questions, as well as in the comment section of my previous YouTube video, which I'll link down below in the comments. So without further ado, I'm going to get into the questions for you. So the first question's kind of a three-parter. So I'll start with part one. What made you start creating candles? For me, candle making definitely wasn't my first choice. So I've got some health issues that have gotten progressively worse over the years, and it's just gotten to the point where it's prevented me from being able to hold, a traditional 9-to-5 type job. And so I was unemployed for a little bit, and just trying to think of something that I could do to, even if not to make money, then just to pass the time, that kind of stuff. And so I've always been like kind of a little candle addict. I was spending a lot of money at Yankee Candle and Bath and Body Works, so I decided, maybe I'd try to make some myself and see how that would work out for me. And so my wife encouraged me a lot, very sweet lady. And so she encouraged me to get the beginning supplies to make my own candles. And so we put everything together. I did countless hours of research and work to get prepared for it. And I just dug right in once my supplies arrived, and I've never looked back since. What was intended as a hobby and for personal use has just blossomed into this wonderful business with just the most amazing customers and fan base. It's a really great thing. So that's kind of what got me into making candles myself. The second part of this question, how do you market your business and how do you brand yourself? So marketing is going to look a little bit different for everybody's individual business. So there's not like a cut and dry method for getting more sales and that kind of deal. You kind of have to find your brand before you can market yourself. So your brand is your image. It's kind of who's your target audience, what are you creating, and who is it for, if that makes any sense. So you kind of have to find your niche. So for some people, that's like the super, luxe candles. For other people, it's, a budget candle. For some people, it's, the holistic kind of natural, that kind of deal. Some people are really into like aromatherapy and that kind of stuff. So you just have to really find where do you fit in and how do you market yourself to those people. So marketing, as I said, you have to find your brand first before you can market. And so for the marketing aspect of things, you have to find your target audience, which it'll fit in with your niche. You find your target audience, and then you try to reach those people through either how you advertise on your personal social media pages or how you pay for your advertising. So a lot of advertisers that you have to pay for, like Google ads and Facebook ads, which are the two main ones that I use, they've got a lot of like analytical stuff that you can look at. It usually goes off of previous ads you've run, and it tells you who views it and who reacts to it. So that will give you more insight into how to run your ads effectively. But I mean, there's a whole lot that goes into the marketing aspect of things, and I'm still learning myself. I don't think you ever get it fully right because it's an ever-evolving type of thing. But once you find your target audience and you find out how to reach them, that's kind of when you start getting some solid business. So the last part of this question is, what's the biggest struggle or hardship that I've faced with my business? So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of, we all struggle with our business. Nobody has a smooth ride throughout it. But for me, I would say my biggest struggle has been comparing myself to other makers. I tend to hold myself back by comparing myself to people that I view as better than me. I see their posts with their successes. I see how beautiful their creations are. And I look at the stuff that I make and the way that I market them, and I'm just like, am I doing enough? So overcoming that struggle it's been one of the hardest things I've had to do. You know, I launched my business in September of 2019, and it's just been a constant battle of raising my confidence and not comparing myself to others, because it's not fair to myself and it's not fair to those other makers either. So that's my biggest struggle. You have to learn how to stay true to yourself, how to be confident in yourself, and how to overcome that, because the only thing that's holding you back right now is, I don't want to like say this and sound mean, but it's yourself, because you know, we're our own worst enemies, especially when it comes to, you know, doing a craft of some sort. And so you got to overcome a lot of personal barriers, and once you overcome those, it's going to be smooth sailing. So we'll move on to the next question here. So this one, this came from the YouTube channel. So somebody asked, how did you conquer wick testing? And so I guess the way I'd respond to that is, I haven't. And I don't think anybody really truly ever does. So wick testing is it's a constant battle. You know, just recently with HTP, how they changed their supplier for their yarn. You know, people are already having to retest. There's no way to perfect, you can kind of perfect and get down a system with the testing process, but as far as conquering wick testing, it's just a lot of work, you know. You can't truly conquer it and just get it right every time. You're going to have a lot of failures before you have successes, and that's okay. But as far as wick testing goes, obviously you guys know it is crucial to wick test, because you don't want to sell a product that either doesn't burn well or burns a little bit too well and can burn down somebody's house. So there's a lot of people go more in depth than some other people, but for me, with my wick testing, I just picked out, you know, a couple of different wick types that interested me just based on my own research and off of Candle Science's suggestions. Candle Science also has this phenomenal wick suggestion guide on their website. I'll link that down below as well. But that's a great baseline for where you need to start testing. So you pick the diameter of your jar on their little wick suggestion guide, and it'll tell you what they suggest from different brands of wicks. The wicks that I use the most would be Eco Wicks. I've also used HTP, and then I've used the CD series, but I really like those Eco Wicks. In summation, you can't really conquer wick testing, but you can make it more manageable, and you know, it can be done, you know, and it will be done. I believe in you guys. So the next question we're going to move on to is, what do I need to start out with making candles? So there's obviously some basics that you'll need. It's going to depend if you want to use a Presto pot or some other kind of melting pot for your wax, or if you want to go ahead and use the double boiler method. For either method, you're going to want to get a pouring pitcher. It's just made out of aluminum. They sell it on Candle Science for like $8. You're definitely going to want a pouring pitcher, maybe 2, maybe 3. You know, I can never have enough pouring pitchers. You know, I've used so many. But you definitely need at least one. And if you're using double boiler, then that's what you'll use to melt the wax on the stove. If you're using a Presto pot, that's what you'll pour the wax into. The other most obvious thing that you'll need is you're going to need a scale. It all comes down to numbers and decimals in candle making. And so it's important that you're accurate with your ratios. It's important that you're accurate with your weights, so that way you can create a consistent product and a quality product. Some other things you'll need, you're definitely going to need a thermometer. And I would suggest you get a digital meat thermometer. That's what I use. It's got a quick read time on it. It's got a nice digital display. It can stand up to a lot of abuse with the heat and with the splashing of melted wax and dropping and all kinds of stuff. But you definitely need a thermometer. I don't like the glass ones because they can shatter and you have to pick out broken glass from your wax, and that's no fun. And that's just the most ideal thermometer in my opinion. Some other things you're going to need to actually make the candles is you're going to need wicks, wax, fragrance oil, dyes, those kind of things. I can't tell you exactly what to get because it's all personal preference. So as far as the wax goes, you have to figure out, what do I want to use? And when you go on the websites of wax suppliers like Candle Science, Lone Star, Flaming Candle Co., Wood and Wick Co., when you go on their websites, they'll tell you kind of the pros and cons of the waxes, or just kind of the qualities of the wax. When you find a wax you like, fantastic, order it. You'll also need wicks, and unfortunately you're going to have to buy more wicks than you're going to use, more types of wicks than you're going to use. And it adds up quickly, but it's essential because you're going to need to test. And so you're also going to need a jar. So before you pick out your wicks, you need to pick out what kind of vessel you're going to want to use. And I would order a couple dozen of those because you're going to go through a lot of jars kind of starting out there. So pick your jar. Try to keep it at just one jar to start out so that wick testing is a little easier for you. And then go on that Candle Science wick suggestion guide that I was talking about earlier. Measure the diameter of your jar if it doesn't say it on the website. And enter that in with the type of wax that you've picked out, and it will tell you a baseline wick to start with. And so I would order that size, and I would order a couple of sizes bigger than it as well. So I would order one size smaller, that size, and then two more sizes that are bigger than that. That's just how I would start out with it, and that's how I do my process. Because the wick guide, like I said, can be a little bit inaccurate. Sometimes it's spot on, but for the most part, yeah. So we've got the wicks, wax jars, the pitcher, the thermometer. You'll also want a little notebook, and that might not sound that important, and you might have it at home, but you want a little notebook because you want to take extensive notes on your candle making, on your testing. You want to make sure that you can replicate what you did. So you don't want to do a whole day's worth of work and not have it written down to where you won't remember what you did to get the results you wanted. So you got all those. You've got the digital scale. And I was talking about dyes. Dyes aren't essential. I do not use dyes. I never have. I probably never will. I just don't like... I like adding as few things to my candles as I can. It cuts down the cost, cuts out another factor in the testing process. And I just like the look of the natural wax. It's just personal preference. It's not like using dyes is bad for your candles or anything, but it's just not the look I was looking for. Fragrance oils, because people buy candles for the smell. So you'll want to look through, there's a bunch of different suppliers, but I use Candle Science for a lot of my scents, and they're phenomenal. They work well, they smell great. I haven't had any complaints. So you need fragrance oil, and so pick out, I would say, no more than 4 scents for your first little test batch that you're going to do. And yeah, that's all that you need. So the next question we got here, can I use crayons to dye my candles? No, you cannot. So crayons are not intended for candle making. They're toxic to burn, and they're not meant to be melted. They're just not meant for candles. They make specific candle dye chips, and they also make liquid dye that are specific for candles. You always want to be using specific candle making supplies for making candles. Not to mention, using crayons could wind up being more expensive than just using actual candle dye. But the reasons you don't want to use crayons for candle dyeing is there's a lot of reasons, but I'll touch on some of these. So for one, it's toxic, not meant to be burnt. It's going to give you a lot more soot, and it's just going to be bad for anybody breathing it in. Candles already aren't necessarily good for you to breathe in, but adding something that's not meant to be in them it's a no-no. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the colors. They won't be what you expect. They're not going to be as vibrant and as bright as those crayon colors. They're going to get dulled down when they get dispersed into white wax, and so you're going to be a little disappointed by the color. Not to mention, crayons, when you burn them, when you melt them and mix them into your wax, and then you actually go to burn the candle, when you burn the candle wax, it creates this little residue that clogs up your wick, which is not great because your wick will either completely put itself out, or it'll just start to slowly tunnel down and then put itself out. And what sucks about that is you cannot reuse the wax because it's got the crayon in it. So stick away from crayons, use dedicated candle making supplies, or do not use dyes at all. That's my suggestion. Our next question here, what is the difference between hot throw and cold throw, and why are they important? So that's a great question, actually. So the difference is pretty easy, it's pretty self-explanatory. Hot throw is, what's your candle's scent like when it's lit? How does it fill the room? How does it feel? How does it smell? So that's a very important first impression for people when lighting one of your candles for the first time. Cold throw is just the opposite. It is what it smells like straight out of the jar. When you open up the candle and you give it a sniff, that's the first thing you do at a candle store when you go. Why are they important? So hot throw and cold throw are both incredibly important for different reasons. So hot throw, people are buying candles because they want them to smell good, they want their homes to smell good, and they want to pay for a candle that they can smell. And so if you have a candle, they light it, and it doesn't fill up their little office space or their little bedroom or their bathroom or their living room, if they can't smell it, they're not going to feel happy paying for it. They're going to write you a bad review. Not to mention you want to put out quality products. So a hot throw is incredibly important because that's the whole point of making a scented candle. The cold throw, a lot of people kind of undermine the importance of the cold throw, but I'll tell you why it's important. So when you go into a store and you're looking at candles, how do you compare them? You open them up, you smell them, and whatever leaves the best first impression you buy. At least that's how I do it. If you have your candles in stores, in a boutique, in your own store, anything like that, or even a farmer's market, those types of things too, people are going to smell your candles, and if they're not impressed and blown away by the smell, they're not going to pay for it. And so it's important to have that great first impression. Now, if you do exclusively online sales, it's still super important, because what's the first thing you do when you get a package? You open it up. Oh, it's a candle. You smell it. And if they're not, blown away by the smell, they're either going to immediately message you and ask for a refund, or they'll be silently dissatisfied and leave you a bad review. There's no good situation that comes out of selling somebody a candle that doesn't smell good. And so that's why the cold throw is important as well as the hot throw. Our next question here, how do you fix wet spots and sinkholes in candles? So I actually made a video on this, which I'll link down in the description. It's a method that I use with tinfoil that actually prevents a lot of these issues, or makes them a little less severe. But for the most part, wet spots, you cannot avoid them. So you can avoid them in your little controlled space, but as soon as the cold air hits them in the winter months, or a customer leaves it out on their table or anything like that, wet spots are going to pop up. Now, wet spots, they don't mean anything. They're nothing. The only reason we care about them as candle makers is because we notice them as candle makers. Before any of us were making candles, did you ever notice wet spots on candles on the shelves? I didn't. Wet spots, you can't fix them. It's unfortunate, but it's what it is. As far as the sinkholes, so sinkholes are actually caused when the wax cools. It kind of constricts towards the middle here, and it pulls up towards the wick, and then it kind of, as it's sinking, it creates a little hole there. That's kind of the simplified version of why it happens. How you prevent that is all comes down to your temperatures and the cooling time of your candle. So for me, I do whatever I can to slow down the cooling process so that it stays warmer for longer and has a better chance at adhering to the outside of the jar and cooling more evenly. some waxes you're going to get sinkholes pretty much no matter what you do. Mainly with like paraffin-based waxes. And so how you overcome that is you do the double pour method, which is where you basically pour half the candle, let it harden, and then you pour the second half so that there's not as deep of a spot to create a sinkhole. Sinkholes are avoidable by, there's a bunch of different methods on YouTube, but the one that's worked the best for me is the one that I came up with. And so that's why I decided to share it with people. That's in the description if you want to check that out. It's helped a lot of people, and it's actually why I started this channel. Now we've got our last question of the night. So sometimes I feel like giving up. How do you keep going in this business? So I share in those feelings a lot. You know, I feel discouraged a lot, and I want to give up a lot, especially recently with the holidays and with, you know, seasonal affective disorder and just cold, dark all the time, you know. Angry customers reaching out, you know, about shipping delays that are completely out of our control. I get it. You know, a lot of us want to quit right now. And when you hear that little voice in your head saying, is this worth it? You need to tell it no. You need to tell it to stop. You need to quiet that voice, because it could be the biggest mistake of your life. And I'm glad that I didn't give up. So to keep going in this business, it's important to reach out to other makers. That's kind of why there's a big community on Facebook for candle makers in the DIY candle group with Jeff Stanley. Lean on each other for support, for encouragement, and for inspiration. And if you're starting to feel yourself burning out, there's nothing wrong with taking a break. You know, I took a long break. This time last year, I took almost a 6-month break because I was just overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do, and I took a 6-month break. I didn't think I was ever going to get back into it, and I jumped back in May of this year, and it's just night and day compared to how it was before. I've got, you know, just newfound inspiration, newfound motivation, and, you know, I'm just killing it recently. Not trying to brag or anything, but, like, I've just been putting in the work and, you know, getting the results from it. And so when you feel discouraged, it's really important to reach out to others, because, you know, a lot of us are feeling similarly, and leaning on each other is kind of a support system. It will help you a lot. And another thing, ask questions. You know, if you're feeling discouraged because your wick testing is not going great, or you're not getting a good hot throw, or you're frustrated with your type of wax, reach out. Ask questions to other makers. The best way to overcome a problem is to just admit that there is a problem and try to figure it out constructively. Because if you get in your head, you're going to kind of beat yourself up over it, and that does nothing but discourage you further. So that's why it's important to reach out to others, ask the questions that you have, and people will help you, especially in that DIY candle group. Because I've asked a lot of questions that I thought were dumb questions, but I got crazy amounts of support and help. So yeah, to finish off that question, you got to stifle that voice in your head that's, you know, discouraging you, bringing you down. You got to turn off those thoughts, and that's easier said than done, obviously, but you need to reach out to others when you're feeling discouraged, because we're all in this together. You know, we're a little candle family, and reaching out to each other is important because it helps keep us in our game. And so there you go. So that's going to be the end of the Q&A today. I would like to thank you all for sticking around and watching the video. Thank you guys for giving me the idea and for sending in your questions. If you guys liked this kind of video setting, let me know in the comments. And if you have any more questions you'd like me to address in another video, just leave them down below. You know, I try to respond to every comment that I can. Sometimes I get a little overwhelmed, but I try to respond to everybody. And I try to answer every question that I get. The other thing, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. You know, if you want to see more, you know, I've got a lot of great ideas in my head. Now that the holidays are over, you know, I'm getting back in gear and kind of hunkering down on the YouTube channel. So subscribe. You can turn on the notification bell. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And you guys have a great day.